Okay. Good evening. I'm Bill Sargent, and tonight we're going to be talking about my new book called Terror by Error, ? The COVID Chronicles. So let's just jump right into it. The first time most of us were aware of COVID-19 was when we heard that the Diamond Princess was in quarantine in Yokohama, Japan. And there were a number of passengers, mostly Americans, who were on board. But I really go back to the early days of our country. As a matter of fact, this was in 1617, before the Plymouth Plantation, and the Native Americans, or what was called a virgin population, because they hadn't picked up diseases like smallpox, but Europeans had. And when the Europeans came over to this country, they gave the Native Americans smallpox, and actually they did a form of biological warfare, because they actually would give them blankets that had been that a person with smallpox had been using, and they picked up the disease that way. And then during the Revolution, General Washington had to variolate the entire Continental Army, and he had to do this in secret, because basically what he did was he was vaccinating the entire army with a system that's called variolation. So rather than vaccinating the way we think of it now, they would simply take a pustule off of somebody that had smallpox and then scratch it into somebody's arm, and that person would get sick, but not quite as sick as the person before. But essentially, the whole Continental Army was out of commission, was sick for about 2 weeks. And if the British had known about that and had attacked that time, it would have been the end of the Revolution before it really even got started, and it would have had a major effect on U.S. history and world history. This was the Chinese form of variolation. If any of you have had a COVID test recently, you know where they got the idea from. It looks quite terrible. But what he is doing is he's actually blowing the smallpox vaccine into this young girl who was the patient. And then, of course, vaccines came about with Edward Jenner. And what he realized is that the people who were taking care of cows, the cow herds, would come down with cowpox, and it was a minor disease, but it would affect them. But what he realized is that they were then safe; they were immune from getting smallpox. So what he did is he would take the cowpox and scratch it into people's arms. As a matter of fact, all of us who are over a certain age have been given cowpox. If you look at your left arm and you see that little mark there where you got vaccinated, that was where they scratched in the cowpox. So it really hadn't been changed from the early days when Jenner first came up with it. And then, of course, we call it vaccine because it came from cows, which were the Latin name for cow is vacca. Now, our story really starts in 1866, and that's when the U.S. Health Service set up a laboratory because a lot of the ranchers in the area were picking up Rocky Mountain spotted fever. And so they set up this laboratory to study that and actually to find vaccines for it. And what they would do is they would take the ticks and simply crush up the live tick, add a little bit of carbolic acid, and then give that slurry to somebody, and that would vaccinate them against Rocky Mountain spotted fever. However, it was a fairly dangerous thing to do. About 4 or 5 of the technicians who were in the laboratory doing this work died because of it. So that was one of the first laboratory accidents when they were dealing with these agents. And this, of course, was the 1918 Spanish flu. And, you know, we're sort of revisiting that today. We have similar temporary shelters set up for people, and the numbers are getting close to what we experienced in 1918. In 1942, there were a couple other accidents. This was near Porton Downs, which was the biological warfare agency in England, and they made a mistake, and anyway, they set off a bomb full of anthrax, and it affected the whole island just off of the coast, and so that island is you know, inundated with the anthrax, and they took all the topsoil off of the island. But even so, people say it's probably going to take about 50 years before they can clean it up and people can get back out there. Now, in 1962, we were right in the middle of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and there was a young agent just started with the CIA, and they told him to show up at the airport. This was Air America. These were the planes. It was the airline that the CIA had. And he was told, they didn't tell him what he was going to do. They just showed up. They put him on the plane. They flew at night over the Caribbean. And when they got over Cuba, they said, okay, now open the door in front of you, open the box, and throw the contents out onto the island. And he opened up the box, and it was teeming with ticks. And all of these ticks had a cocktail of different agents that had been put into the ticks. And the idea was to drop them over the island, and then the sugar cane workers would get sick, and that would affect the economy of Cuba. And then in 1968, there was another mistake, and a chemical agent killed off about 2,000 sheep. And if the wind had been blowing the other direction, that chemical agent would have blown back over Salt Lake City, and we would have had a major problem. There was a lot of publicity about this. And actually, in 1969, President Nixon took us out of offensive biological warfare. If any of you were around Cambridge at that time, Matt Messelson was very instrumental in this. He was a biologist at Harvard. He sort of gained fame because earlier the State Department claimed that that there was a Russian agent that they were and they were spraying it on some of the on the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Vietnam, and they claimed that this was a Russian agent. He went over there, collected some of it, and came back and said, no, it's bee feces. And it was just full of yellow pollen. So he sort of gained his credentials that way. And then he happened to bump into Henry Kissinger at Logan Airport. And Kissinger said, you know, we're trying to figure out what to do about biological warfare. And Messelson said, well, I'll write you a paper. And he came up with a paper, and essentially he said that we should get out of biological warfare business, basically because we had all the advantages in other types of warfare, and it would be best to keep biological agents out of the hands of rogue states and terrorists. This was 1976. And this was the so-called swine flu epidemic As it turned out, only one person ever came down with the flu, but President Ford wanted to show that he could do something other than pardon Nixon. So he set up a massive program to inoculate every man, woman, and child in the United States. And they went ahead. There was a lot of publicity. And as I said, nobody got sick with the swine flu, but thousands of people ended up having neurological problems. So it was a real fiasco, and a reminder that vaccines are a risky business. We've actually already seen that 2 people came down with anaphylactic shock from the vaccine that was is now being given to people in Great Britain. Then in 1978, all of a sudden, a lot of people came down with what they thought was rheumatoid arthritis in Old Lyme, Connecticut. And they did some investigation, and they realized that this is what they thought was a new disease, namely Lyme disease. And this, of course, probably some of you are familiar with the bullseye rash that you get. I've actually had this 4 times, but they gave me doxycycline, and I didn't develop the full disease. But it's a very nasty disease. The ticks are carried on deer, and there've been a lot of programs to try to cull back the deer population. It actually doesn't work very well because the deer can carry so many ticks. You only have to have 1 or 2 deer that can do the damage. So either you have to eradicate all the deer, or simply trying to cull the herd isn't very effective. This is some of the work that was being done first to identify the spirochete that forms Lyme disease. This was Harry Bergdorfer, who was a Swiss scientist, but he was working at the Rocky Mountain lab in Bitterroot, Montana. And he was quite famous for using Swiss watchmaking tools to inject ticks with various diseases. So here you can see these are mice that have Rocky Mountain spotted fever or some other disease like that. And what he is doing is he is feeding about a half dozen to 10 ticks. So they are getting infected with the disease. And this was being done in a number of places, but one of them was Plum Island. I like to call this the bad Plum Island, not the good Plum Island that we have up on the North Shore. But this was Plum Island in Long Island Sound, and it was right across the water from Old Lyme, Connecticut. And they had hundreds of thousands. They had at least 200,000 ticks in the laboratories where they were doing. This was a laboratory for animal diseases. So they were studying anthrax and rinderpest and a lot of diseases like that were being used, that could be used for biological warfare. Security wasn't very tight, and they had a number of storms there, hurricanes, and when they had that, the electricity would go out, and then the freezers started melting. The viruses and bacteria were released, and also they figure a lot of the ticks got out. And if you go to the island today, it's absolutely inundated with ticks. And the idea was, this is the Rocky Mountain, this is the Lone Star tick that we're beginning to see in New England. It used to be more of a southern species. They're kind of they're a nasty creature because they actually hunt you. They'll rather than the regular ticks that just hang on a piece of grass, and if you come by, they'll drop down and grab onto you. These guys will actually see you from a distance, and you'll get 20 or 30 of them that attack you. And if they do bite you, then you become allergic to red meat. And so the idea was that the ticks got loose from the Plum Island laboratory, and they were picked up by migratory birds. And then they were distributed up and down the East Coast. And if you look at a bird like a heron or an egret, you'll see about 20 or 30 ticks, usually around their eyes. So they're very, very susceptible to ticks and tick-borne diseases. Then in 1982, there was an outbreak of anthrax in Stepnogorsk in the Ural Mountains, and the Soviet scientists said that it was a natural occurrence. People had eaten some meat that had been infected with the anthrax. And actually, again, Dr. Messelson was in touch with some of the scientists, and he brought them over to this country, and they gave, talks at Harvard and at Johns Hopkins and at the American Academy of Sciences, and were very well received. And everybody bought this idea that there had been a natural occurrence. And then in 1982, Ken Allebeck, who was a young doctor who then went into the biological warfare business in the Soviet Union and rose very, very quickly. And he was head of Biopreparat. And we thought for 20 years that Biopreparat was simply a laboratory for developing pharmaceuticals. And when he defected, he told us that in fact, the Stepnogorsk had been an accident in a factory that was milling anthrax, and somebody left the cover of the filter off, and at least hundreds, perhaps thousands of people in the neighboring village had died because of that. And he also said that they had about 12 tons of smallpox that were available to put in missiles to fly towards the West. And so anyway, he defected. He came to this country. He was being held in a CIA safe house, and then afterwards he was released, and he became, a very successful owner of a biotech company. And I was working on a book about vaccines, and I wanted to talk to him. And I figured I would have to go through all kinds of red tape and, CIA clearance and everything like that. But finally, I decided one day, well, I'll just, make a cold call and, see what happens. And I called, and boom, this guy answered. And I said, I'm trying to reach Ken Allebeck. And he said, you got him. And, then I called him several times, and it was Ken and Bill, and he was a very engaging guy. And he gave us all kinds of information. We had been completely in the dark. He said that the Soviet scientists were always very amused that we bought their cover story about Stepnogorsk. And now our story really moves to Wuhan, China. This is the Center for Virology. And there are four theories for the origins of COVID. The first, of course, was the idea that it came from the seafood market, where you had a lot of different live animals. And the idea was that this was sort of a petri dish, and that you would that the disease jumped from these bats, these horseshoe bats, to humans in the seafood market. The problem with that is they never found any of viruses in any of the animals in the seafood market. So it really didn't hold water, and they quickly changed their story. The next theory was that this was a zoonotic disease. In other words, it originally had been a disease of animals that then spills over to humans. And it's usually when we do things like clear cutting, we get so close to nature that we come in contact with animals like bats that are carrying the virus. But the problem with this theory is you not only have to have bats, which are what are called a reservoir organism, that it's a reservoir for the virus, but you have to have an amplifier organism. So it's either a bird or maybe a pig. And this is the reason that when we call something an avian flu or a swine flu, we're actually naming it after the amplifier organism. And they looked for a number of amplifier organisms for COVID. They looked at pangolins, they looked at snakes, they looked at ticks, they looked at all kinds of things, and they never found an amplifier organism. So that doesn't really hold water either. And then the third theory was that it was actually a biological agent. And a lot of these facilities, we have what are called dual use facilities. For instance, Plum Island and the laboratory at Bitterroot were both dual use. So you were doing legitimate research on vaccines on one side of the laboratory, and on the other side of the laboratory, you were stockpiling potential agents and the animals that carried them for potential biological weapons. I don't think we have enough evidence to say that this was a biological agent. However, this was Dr. Yan, and she defected. She was working for the World Health Organization in Hong Kong, and when COVID broke out, they sent her to China because she was the only person in their laboratory that spoke Mandarin, and they wanted to anyway. They wanted her to find out, about the origins of COVID-19, and she found what she thought was a cover-up. And she felt that there were actually two strains. One of them was originally a military agent, and she's gotten a little bit of attention, but she's sort of surrounded by fairly sketchy people in this country, including Steve Bannon. So I think she's sort of compromised because of that. But I think she has no reason to be lying. She gave up everything. She had to leave her family and her career. So I think we should probably be paying a little bit more attention to some of the things she's saying. The fourth theory, and I think this is the most plausible one, is the Chinese scientists were doing what's called gain of function research. And this sort of research is carried on all over the world by different scientists. It's the standard way that you find out what vaccine to produce against flu every year. So what you do is you identify the virus, you put it into a ferret, it mutates, you take it out of the ferret, you put it into another ferret, and after so many ferrets, it can jump from ferret to ferret, which means it can jump from human to human. And this is called gain of function research because you gain that function of transmissibility. So I think they were doing this. It was actually funded partly by the United States, partly by the World Health Organization. And it was sort of a standard way to figure out how viruses become communicable. They do it on ferrets because they have a pulmonary system that's similar to humans. And this is the research. And when I look at that, it makes me cringe because look at how close that needle is to this guy's hand. So I think what happened is that one of the technicians successfully did the gain of function research And then the ferret sneezed, or he jabbed himself in the finger, or he got blood on his hands. Anyway, he became patient 0, who was sent across the street to the Wuhan hospital. And that's where the first 44 patients were identified. So I think that's the most plausible explanation for the jump from humans, from animals to humans. And so in that instance, the ferret is essentially the amplifying organism. And I think what lends credence to that, you've probably all seen the headlines that Denmark has had to cull 17 million mink from their mink farms where they produce them for the fur trade, because the mink were picking up COVID-19, and they had developed a new variant of the virus, and they were passing it on to humans. So they had to cull the initial idea was to cull a full 17 million. They actually stopped partway through that. These are the temporary shelters that China built as soon as they found out that they had COVID-19. And these were massive operations. And of course, what they would do is they would go through the streets, they would test everybody. If you had any symptoms, if you had a high fever, anything like that, you would be transferred to these to the temporary facilities and taken care of, and fed and taken care of very well. But you would have been removed from the population. So what they did is they slowed the spread of the disease really quite effectively. This is inside those temporary facilities, sparse, but everything that you needed. And we're beginning to do the same thing. Actually, Massachusetts is now doing that with all the about 100 colleges. Every student gets tested about twice a week, and if they pick up if they have any symptoms, they are then sent to a temporary hospital like this to remove them from the college population, and that's been extremely successful. The colleges in Massachusetts have under a 1% infection rate, whereas the general population is over about 4%. And of course, the big news now is the vaccine. And it's really pretty astounding that we've been able to develop it so quickly, and it seems like that it's safe and effective. And so there's a little light at the end of the tunnel. This just simply shows you kind of what my favorite creature, and this of course is a horseshoe crab. And horseshoe crabs are either they're going to help us get out of the pandemic. They could be a major roadblock, because all the antibody tests and all the vaccines have to be tested to make sure they're free of pyrogens. And the way they do that is using horseshoe crab blood for what's called the LAL test that tests for pyrogens. So it's a little frightening to think that our whole vaccine policy is based on a wild animal that is declining up and down the East Coast. But the companies that produce the lysate say that there's enough to meet the demand. So we will have to wait and see. So I thank you very much. That's the end of my talk, and I'd be glad to take any questions that you might have. And I will just point out, this is my book, and it's available through local bookstores, and you can also get it through Barnes and Nobles and Amazon, and you can also get it on my site, which is williamsargent.net.
And Plum Island Outdoors.
And Plum Island Outdoors, absolutely. I'm sorry. Yes, you could do it through the Plum Island Outdoors Facebook page on the store site. Thank you, Andy. website.
Anyway, question,
right.
there was an article on horseshoe crabs and testing, and somebody was feeling that this was killing off the population of horseshoe crabs, and they suggested that there are artificial versions of what the horseshoe crab provides. What are
Yeah.
your thoughts?
I think this is potentially very interesting. There's a woman scientist in Singapore that actually used gene splicing to come up with an artificial way of making the horseshoe crab test. I think the potential problem with that is it doesn't seem to be as sensitive, and it could be more expensive. And so companies haven't taken that up because they don't want to, and the FDA hasn't approved that because they don't want to change horses in midstream, particularly in the midst of a pandemic. They know that the live animal lysate works. They have 30 years of data about that, but they really don't have enough data with the artificial. But if it does prove to be as effective somewhere down the line, then that would take all the pressure off of horseshoe crabs. And I see we have one guest who is muted, but if you want to ask a question, I think either you can unmute. Hi, Melanie. Yes.
I didn't realize I was muted. Sorry, it took me a while to get in. I don't do a lot of Zoom things, but I thought that was really fascinating. And
thank you.
Especially because I just want to share that I have a client right now that's creating an oral vaccine. And so I think that's going to be the next big thing because, a lot of people, the advantage of the oral vaccine is he's going to have two versions of it. One's going to be little bottles you can just drink. And the other one is going to be pills, the same thing in a pill format. And so, the advantage of this is it doesn't have to be refrigerated and anyone can give it out and it can go around the world to poor places. So he's really excited to get ready to do a release on that. So he's
who's developing that?
He's in preclinical trials and he just got funding. He's in Philadelphia. He's a startup. He's a CGMP company. And it's really exciting. So Governor Wolf from Pennsylvania has committed like $5.2 million, and he was in a big press conference. And he is expecting to go into live animal testing. He did 100% success in mice. In the preclinical trials. I got him in the New York Times. And then, so now he got money to expand his factory, partnered with a guy that's a vaccine developer. And the vaccine developer is his partner. And they're getting ready to, they think by mid 2021, they're going to have this oral vaccine available. And,
go ahead. I just learned that that we actually, Moderna, that came up with the first vaccine. There was a Chinese scientist that released the sequence of the virus in January, and he got into a lot of trouble. He was sort of under house arrest because of it, but he wanted to warn the West. And so he sent us that the sequence. It was sent to the scientist at Moderna. Over one weekend, they developed the vaccine. Wow. And so we've actually had, and that's the vaccine that we're using today. So we actually have had that vaccine since January. All of the deaths that we've had between then and now could have been prevented actually if they started using the vaccine
But
earlier. Of
why
course,
didn't
you
that
didn't
happen?
you didn't want to. Sorry.
Why didn't that happen?
Well, it had to go through the clinical trials, because that's, some people think that after this is over, they can actually streamline the clinical trials. And you can actually do the safety clinical trials before you even have the specific virus. You can test it on a similar family of viruses. And also at about that time, there were about 70 scientists, researchers at Harvard and MIT who had developed a little do-it-yourself vaccine. I think it might have been a nasal vaccine, and they were giving it to themselves. So they were actually they were vaccinating themselves. One of the guys was George Church, whose claim to fame is he's trying to bring back woolly mammoths and set up a little Pleistocene park in Siberia that you can, tourists will go there to see the Pleistocene megafauna.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. This is a really big thing. And I'm excited about this client because
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's a big opportunity. He's a startup. He started out as a compound pharmacy, when they had all those shots and people were getting spinal meningitis. He did the aseptic processing. So he does custom prescriptions for people. And now he's got this vaccine, and the other guy developed the vaccine and he's going to produce it.
Yeah.
So it's exciting. He really thinks that vaccines are really, this is just the beginning. There's going to be a lot of different vaccines and
a
lot of diseases, sadly enough.
And I think the interesting thing is that a lot of the companies that are being funded are all startups. So we sort of took a big gamble.
Yeah, he is.
Moderna was. Guy. Moderna was a little startup company, and now it's worth millions. But we took real chances. Pfizer was a more established company, but what they wanted to do is both try the new the new technologies and with the startup companies as well as the people who have been through the whole clinical trial process before.
Right.
There's also there was another company that is producing the syringes, and again it was a startup company. They had never produced the syringes. They just had a prototype, and they happened to meet one of the people on the task forces at a conference in Europe. And this guy just pulled this prototype out of his pocket. And what it was a syringe with a little bulb and then a computer chip, so that it records, the date, the dosage, the patient, and all of this information is automatically recorded.
Wow.
And that was, again, as I said, all they had was a prototype.
That's amazing that, things happen so fast with this whole
Absolutely.
virus thing. It's really strange.
And well, the other thing is, before you actually, you didn't develop the vaccine until the disease had pretty much run its course, and you had created herd immunity because so many people had gotten sick, and you had run out of hosts, and then they developed the vaccine, and that's probably going to be kind of the case, with this pandemic as well. But in the future, it would be possible to get ahead of that so that you could actually have the vaccine at the beginning of the disease and, stop it earlier.
Right.
So your friend might be part of that.
Well, that's what he's realizing, that, and he has,
Yeah.
he's just the distributor of the vaccine, and he's saying,
Right.
I can have other vaccines, and
Yeah.
he's a black guy, he's a black owned company. I'm like, let's use it,
Yeah.
because people want to
Yeah.
invest, and he's really a bright guy and the vaccine guy, and they could win the bid for oral vaccines right now. They've got the money, they're ready to produce. The New York Times vaccine tracker, he said, let me know when you go to clinical trials, which will be February, March, and then he'll be ready to start, vaccinating the world. Or whatever.
Terrific. Yeah.
I'm excited. For once I'm in the right business. I was in fiber optics and that tanked.
Yeah.
And
And what are you doing now?
I landed in medical devices. Well, I do websites and marketing. I call myself Innovative Marketing for Science and Technology. So I don't know, I landed in medical devices because I was in semiconductors. That started to go down, but it was all hot technology. I guess I was at R&D Magazine first. And then this led me to marketing and starting my own company. And so I went from semiconductors, then I went to the Biomed Devices show in Boston. And I had hip replacements, so I'm a medical device expert here from the patient point of view. I had something to talk about. And my hip got recalled, actually. Somebody else wants to put me on a medical panel about my hip in Johnson & Johnson because, that's a whole big issue too. So anyway, and then just kind of, I had a few clients and I would go into the medical thing, and now this guy is growing, and I kind of became in medical devices. That show's been really good for me. Biomedical devices. I meet scientists there, and it's like a little niche of bio. I guess I'm more like not into the drug end of it. I guess this puts me more in that area. I came from, hard high tech, I called it, semiconductors and research and development. So, so this is interesting to me because, now here's an opportunity to do COVID, and it's a big field. So so this is good. Go ahead.
And also tick-borne diseases is another area.
That was interesting about the ticks. My sister had Lyme disease. I can't believe you've had it so many times.
Yeah, I've been lucky. And actually in Ipswich, because so many people get it, they simply give you a bottle of doxycycline, and they said if you get a tick bite, don't come in for tests or anything. Just take the doxycycline as soon as you can.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we grew up going to the boat in Essex, so we know all about the tick thing. The backside of Cranes there.
Sure. Yeah.
So thank you so much. This was really good. And I'm going to give a little push for your book because I almost did before the talk, but I guess I wanted to know a little bit more about it. And I'm going to do, I don't know, maybe on LinkedIn. Are you on LinkedIn, Bill?
Andy can tell you I am terrible with all of that. Social media, everything. I'm glad that you guys can do it. I can just write books a little bit, but social media is beyond me.
Well, I don't do much of it. I mean, I'm active on my personal Facebook thing, and I'm trying to do LinkedIn because LinkedIn's really become, I don't know, a way to connect with people. And I was thinking of looking for a part-time job. I'm not very active though. This client could be enough for me. You know, I'm 66.
You can connect with me, Melanie.
This could
You
be a
can connect
full-time
with
job.
me on LinkedIn.
Pardon me?
You can connect with me.
You look familiar. Have I met you, seen you before? Where do you work?
Probably. Andy's a man about town in Newburyport.
Yeah.
Newburyport.
Yeah.
Are you a musician? No.
Well,
You-
I'm actually I've taken a music writing course, and I've written a takeoff song on there's an old 1925 blues song called Karina Karina,
Huh.
and it's about a woman. And I changed Karina Karina. Well, I actually first heard it on Tom Rush. Tom Rush is giving performances where I volunteer in Newburyport at the firehouse. And his last performance in January, I bought his CD he was selling, and it had on there Corona Corona. I mean, Karina Karina.
Oh,
Karina.
And then he went and actually got it because he was on a tour down south, so he got the COVID-19. And so basically, I took the song and rewrote
Tom Rush got it?
words. Tom Rush got it, and he had a terrible time coming back, but he seems to be back.
You should play that. That should be the theme song for the COVID-19 website.
Yeah, I could put. Should I put out the words to the song? I can do that.
Yeah.
Sure.
But anyway, I know somebody that knows him, and I'm hoping she passes the words on to him, and he can sing it.
Terrific.
But it's about it talks about how it got passed at that White House down in Washington D.C. with their parties. But I've also taken a harmonica course, so
cool.
So that's one of the things. But this you'll be able to catch the early moments because it's gonna be. I'm also a video producer.
Oh my God.
And so I'm gonna get this up on the websites.
Do you know Ann Vinsel?
Ann Bissell, it rings a bell.
Actually, I was calling her to help me get on Zoom because I'm always late because I think I know what I'm doing. And I'm like, okay, I start a half hour ahead.
But I had the same trouble. Andy had to
I'm like, I'm such an
ease
idiot.
me into it.
But actually, it's interesting to hear you talk about semiconductors because for years I was a programmer. My first serious programming was computer-aided design of integrated circuits, building CMOS chips back in the 70s.
Wow.
So, and the other thing I wanted to point out is my mother always wanted me not to become an electrical engineer, which I never really was, but
they're kind of crazy, I don't know. The electrical engineers are the smartest. This is all, just my impression. They're one of the smartest engineers, but they're also
crazy.
Kind of crazy. I'll tell you just this one story because we're kind of friends here, right? So I have a friend who's a photographer now, and he worked at Raytheon. And so this was back in the day when, he was working on some kind of some kind of secret technology. And I don't know, we got in some kind of fight with somebody, and they didn't like the way he was acting, and he ripped off all his clothes and he ran through the whole factory and had like a big fit, and they had to chase him down, and he never, needless to say, this is the short story, but never got another job. He's a photographer now. And he let all their secrets out, and he did, you're supposed to be, when you get fired, you're supposed to be, marched out. Anyway, he made a big scene. He has a studio in Ipswich, Bill.
What's his name?
His name is Michael Naimo. He gets thrown off of Facebook. He's a riot. But anyway, he was having,
I think, I think I think the same thing is going on now, because this Operation Warp Speed is it's kind of a quasi-military operation. So I think there's a real clash of cultures between the companies, particularly the new startup companies that are young and sort of eccentric.
Right.
And, they have these military guys coming in and telling them what they can do and what they can't do. And I imagine there's some friction there.
Well, I worked for Raytheon for 1 year.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
And
that's funny.
Lived there pretty damn quick.
Yeah.
I was anti-Raytheon only because they didn't really do marketing. They were, it's just not exciting for me to work there. You know what I mean? I didn't want to work there.
I know what
they do everything in house, and it's boring. And I like the startup thing.
Well, I do like small companies. I worked for some very small companies that were, privately owned or not quite public. But what happened is the medium-sized fish bought the little fish, and then the bigger fish bought the medium-sized fish, and then I quit.
Yeah.
I
don't like working for whales.
Yeah.
Well, I've been working for myself for about 40 years.
I think it's really bad when you mad at your boss, Bill.
But we have great conversations, though.
Yeah.
I know, it's hard. I actually, especially with this whole COVID thing, well, before it happened, I was thinking, I should go out and get a part-time job, because it's hard working at home. I'm a social person. I like to go out a little bit more. But anyway, now it's good because I can work at home and I'm all set up, and that's what everybody wants.
Yeah. I've never worked so hard in my life, because I was working on, as soon as I was really pushing on this book, because I wanted to get it out, as soon as possible. And actually this book started, I originally had a book that I was working on after 9/11 that was about vaccines. Then this past year, I was working on a book about ticks. And then when COVID hit, I all of a sudden realized it's probably the same story, the same sort of thing going on.
Right.
And so I jumped into it, and I haven't found anything that's convinced me otherwise. So anyway, I kind of put together the 3 books. And then I had an agent, a very good agent, with a Boston firm, and he died in right at the beginning of COVID. He actually died of a heart attack, not of COVID.
Wow.
So I was sort of, and then it's impossible to reach agents and publishers and everything. So I decided I just would push ahead and publish it myself. And so it's kind of a hard slog, but I think it was the right thing to do. Oh, and then after I finished that, Brandeis came back to me and they wanted to do a 3rd edition of my Horseshoe Crab book, putting in all of the things about COVID. So I had to jump to that and then finish that. And now I'm writing what could be could become another book about COVID-19. But I'm finding, other than people like yourself, a lot of people just, they don't want to talk about it. They're you know.
Well, I don't want to talk about it except for it's my business now, and I want to
Yeah, right. Yeah.
the COVID queen, because
I'm the sort of person that wants that, when you're in the midst of something like this, I want to get as much information as I possibly can to get some sort of power over it. And of course, like you, it's my business, and I would feel kind of silly, writing about birds or something like that when something like this is going on. And it's the one thing I can do. So.
Well, you have to promote yourself more. I don't know. As a marketing person, I think this is like a fantastic book. And have you ever written a press release, sent it to the New York Times? Look at this book I have. Look at my theory.
Yeah, it's anything you could do to help would be great. I have some of that. I'm starting to make inroads, but again, because I'm self-published, it's hard to get that attention. I'm actually doing a lot of these Zoom talks because I think that's a way of reaching out to people.
One thing
I did.
Go ahead.
I did one with New England science writers, and I've done some with various Harvard groups and stuff like that. And I think they've been, well received. So I'm,
Do you collect all those people's names and follow up with emails or create an email list? That's one way you could do it. I guess you have to, and I don't know, these are just my thoughts on things that you could do. You can sell books on the internet, but you have to get people to come to your website and get them interested.
Well,
and
that's where
you
I'm
could
going to
sell
help.
ebooks.
That's where I'm going to help. Bill.
You could make this an ebook. So those are the kinds you can get on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Well, that's a good idea.
You could get on
and
LinkedIn.
Actually, if you
go ahead.
Maybe Andy, maybe you could do that.
But I mean, get you on LinkedIn, or what? What do you mean?
Melanie, is it Melanie?
Yes.
Yes. Was saying that I could get the book on LinkedIn.
Well, no,
you get yourself on LinkedIn first, and you start connecting with people. This is what I'm going to do. I wanted to send a thing out to, I'm just going to make a on LinkedIn, because I'm trying to promote myself. I'm going to say, hey, this is a great book, and I'm going to talk a little bit about your theory. I might even, I took some notes. I would like to, if I had time, do an email newsletter, and this could be a lead in, and I could say, check out this book. I don't have a big audience, but that's the kind of thing that you want to do. You could make posts on LinkedIn, and you can talk about what you do in your different books. And then you go from there.
I'm a marketer's nightmare, because I like to be writing books, not marketing them.
I know.
But let me, if I could send you what we do have. We have a little blurb about the book and the Zoom talks and stuff like that.
That would be good, because I was just going to, I think this is interesting, and I would like to, I wanted to share it with my client too. And it's a good topic for me. I like to do newsletters, and I'm always looking for something to talk about.
Well, Melanie, you can shoot me your email address.
Okay. Where are you on LinkedIn, Andy?
I am.
Okay.
Good.
I've never had
I'll
to
let
find
you
myself, so I'm trying to think of how you would find me. But I mean, I just look in the mirror, you know.
No, I can just Google your name. I'm at
Yeah.
melanieducas.com. You can email me.
Oh, yours is easy. I mean,
I'm Melanie Ducas Music, Melanie Ducas Tech Marketing. What
so
else?
the other way to get to me is just go to plumbislandoutdoors.org, the website.
Uh-huh.
And that's the website that I'm behind. That I'm Bill. Bill and I are Plum Island Outdoors essentially, and it's a 501c3 nonprofit. Blah blah blah. But
Yeah.
anyway, if you fill out the contact form, I will get that, and I will send you back something. So it's plumislandoutdoors.org. I mean, it's who's
Right. I saw that.
sponsoring this. So, but anyway,
Okay.
I
Bill,
can,
you and I have to get together and talk about how to get you do
Yeah.
these things.
Right.
I'm
It's
a
hard
hard
The other
now.
sell.
thing I wanted to say, Melanie, that I'm pretty sure I'm going to get this on Cambridge Community TV.
Terrific.
That would be good.
Right.
The first
So we
step
can-
though, and I don't have a lot of, I'm really busy with my client and everything, but I can steer you in the right direction. You need a press release, and then you could
Yeah,
send it
that's
to
what
the New York
I'll
Times.
send that. Should I send that to melanieducas.com, or do you have an email?
You know what? Melanie at melanieducas.com is one of my emails. I think I'm going to go to that because I have the name of my company, but who can remember that? And it's long. So Melanie at melanieducas.com.
Melanie at
MELANIE at Melanie Ducas, DUKAS.com.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll send that.
I'll
to you. I'll do
definitely
that right
give you
now.
some thoughts and some ideas.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
because this is really good. This is really good. And
Thank you.
it's hard to promote on your own though. But
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
so. I guess the thing about PR and what I'm trying to do with my client is I notice there's a lot of other oral vaccines out there, and they just don't describe it well or make it sound exciting enough. And
Sure.
they're all too technical, and I don't know. It's you need to describe what you have the right way. Like, what's the big benefit? What's your big theory? And I think your theory is incredible. That the number 4 thing about the gain of function research.
Right.
You could write an article about that.
Yeah. And I think
and keep.
I think we're going to hear more.
Book.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I know you want to write, and my problem is I just want to do marketing, and I don't want to do my taxes and all that other crap. But I don't want to send out newsletters. I just want to sit here and do my little thing. But we all have parts of the job we don't like, and it's hard being your own because you have to do everything yourself. I hate the website stuff. My big problem right now is I have to move my server and all my WordPress websites to a new server. That's what I don't want to do. But
Melanie, why are you hosting your own?
Well, I'm not hosting my own, but I have my own server because WordPress websites require a lot of room, and plus that gives me an opportunity to, like, when I'm building a website for a client, I host their websites for them, and they get more room, and it's really a good deal. I don't make any money out of it, but I get my free music website and my free business website, and I give deals to my friends, and then I charge my clients but it's mostly because it's easier. But I got stuck in this Bluehost thing, and first it was, you know, manage your own accounts, and then they put me on this private server, and now they're changing all the technology, so I just have to move them. And you know what? I know how to do it, and I can do it, but I have to sit down and read and do it step by step, and I hate that. So anyway, but
yeah. So we're not that much.
and I'm really excited that the COVID thing, you know, I was like, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? My business is kind of, and this is going to get me through, I think. But we'll see. So, all right, well, let's keep in touch and connect. And yeah, give me some more information, because I want to make a post about it on LinkedIn. And if you were on there, Bill, people could get in touch with you. Like you can put a product on your page at LinkedIn. That's what you should do, Andy. Go on LinkedIn and start making a page, and you just follow what they ask you for. What's your experience? What's your this? What's your that? You could get writing jobs, Bill. You know.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay,
I'm
good.
glad
Well,
you
we'll keep in
joined us,
touch, and I
Melanie.
really enjoyed this. And
Good. Well,
talk soon.
it was nice having you on.
Okay, good. Yeah, thank you. I'm really glad I came. I was just getting ready to give up when it came on. I was like, well, I'm just going to have to tell them I couldn't make it. But yeah, I'm glad. This is really good.
I thought I was going to have to do the same thing, because I couldn't get on either.
That makes me feel better. I'm like, oh, my web designer, I can't even get a Zoom meeting.
And I still don't know how it, all of a sudden it just happened. Yeah.
All right. Well, great talking with you, and we'll keep in touch.
Okay.
All
Good
right.
enough.
Thanks. Okay. I don't know how to get off.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
That's
Leave.
it.
Here's a button. Leave. All right. Bye, guys.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Yeah. I'm going to,
Oops.
oh, there we go.
Are you still there? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, now I see you with your plants. That looks
Yeah.
nice.
Yep.
Okay. See you later, Belle. Thanks.